could do optimizations on charging your battery when the price is low and maybe discharging when the price is high. All these things becomes possible when you do have both the power to control and also the full scope of all the energy flows in the household. You should not forget, there is only one reason why we should exist. We should bring value to the user. The customer might be the utility company, but it's also the end user. And we see this, I think, in more and more in DePIN projects. That's really what matters. You won't be able to win in the long run if you don't have a product that makes sense. Hey.
How are you, my man?
All good.
In a while, but we got a chance here to do a Sourceful specific episode. So I actually just got off with Robin from Wingbits. I didn't realize you guys were both in Sweden, but there's a bit of a Sweden DePIN mafia forming, it seems.
It is, yeah.
You said you guys might try to do an event or something in the future. I'd love to come check it out.
We have talked about it. It's just there's so much stuff going on, and then when all the events are all over, I would say, the globe, both me and Robin, Robin more than me, he's actually been traveling quite a bit more than me. So then you sort of forget, then you forget that you're actually sort of very close, and we should probably hang out more in the. But he's actually moved from Sweden now, so I think he might not have moved yet, but he's moving to Dubai. So
cool.
This is a little bit also about tax reasons. So
I'm sure. Yeah,
I'll probably regret this in the future, but I'm not planning the move yet, at least.
Okay.
And if I need to move, it will definitely need to be the US, because I think that's at least what our main investors at the moment do want. So
that makes sense. I mean, maybe that's a good jumping off point for a quick comparison of kind of the Swedish energy market versus maybe the US or the rest of the world, because I believe you said in the past, maybe Sweden's a bit further ahead in terms of renewables and regulation and that kind of thing. But how do you kind of contrast where you've started to build Sourceful versus where you want to go in the future?
I would say that we started building with the sense, we were, as I think this is a backstory that I just believe that many have the same backstory, and that probably goes for Robin as well. But we were very much inspired by the helium model, and I would say still is. So we started off, could we do something with solar PV based on the DePIN, I would say, cycle, or it wasn't called that at that time, but could we make the solar PV linked to tokenomics and get that growth cycle going? So that was the general idea when we started. And then quickly, when we started to iterate on top of this was 2022, so time flies fast. It was still just an idea. We dove into, I would say, the market a bit more, and this was also the same time that in Sweden the flexible markets were, I would say, more opened up. So these weren't markets before, so everything was controlled, I would say, more or less by the state electric distribution, electric grid. But then it became a market around the same time, and it changed, and a lot of things happened very quick. So we had a battery boom, 2023 and 2024 in Sweden, where you could buy a home battery and you could have an ROI for 1 or 1.5 years. So you could get $4,000 to $6,000 per year just in having your battery as a reserve, like a virtual power plant, distributed energy resource. This is, I would say, not the case today, as it is with, I would say, all new markets, is that you have a very golden moment in the beginning when there might be more demand than there are resources. But still, it's a profitable market, and we see this happening now on scale for more and more countries. We see in the US as well, where you already, and for quite some time, a couple of years, you have been able to monetize, for instance, your Tesla Powerwall 500 to 700 euros or dollars for a year. I think that's a quite typical number. And that's actually quite good numbers if you look at a return of investment. If that hardware is $5,000 and you get like a 10% return on that. So,
and that's actually a good segue into the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, and I think I saw you tweet about it. I've seen Jason Bedo from Daylight tweet about it, but it seems like Tesla virtual power plants, well, Tesla DERs kind of aggregated into virtual power plants, are gaining a lot of adoption, both like on the customer usage side in terms of how many they are and how they're used, but more importantly, how they're interacting with the grid in terms of preventing outages, in terms of dispatching energy. So I'm curious, like, what's your take on Elon and Tesla's play to create these virtual power plants from these DERs that he already has everywhere in terms of electric vehicles, Powerwall charging stations, solar that's plugged in? And, do you think the Tesla VPPs are like competitive or complementary to energy DePINs?
I think they are complementary and also competitive in some sense. We're playing on the same market. So obviously it's a competition, but the thing here is that the demand and the build out, I would say, of renewables and new energy, and the energy demand will be rising. It is rising extremely quick. I think I would say you could probably make the analogy of like early internet days. There were a lot of competition, but everyone that was into the space building on internet, there was space for everyone.
The pie is so large and it's growing very rapidly, right?
So I think that, yes, and they drive adoption. And the thing with Tesla is that, well, I'm a big Tesla believer. I don't need to tell which car I'm driving and have been for some time. So obviously I'm like a believer in the adoption and acceleration of technology, and obviously renewables. But that's just because I'm on the same page exactly as Elon here, is that we have an abundant resource of energy just flowing from the sun, which is extremely simple to take care of, and we are solving, and in some sense already have solved the storage part, because batteries are getting cheaper and will soon be even cheaper. So there was a study of Ember, which is a think tank renewable like institute in the US, that looked at like with an investment in the range of, I think this was $10,000 to $15,000. I need to check the numbers. But like a reasonable investment, if you live in the sunny belt of the planet, you're already able to be 97% independent. You could actually power everything in your house if you're just a normal consumer. So you don't need that much batteries. If we're talking about 15 kilowatt hour battery size, and 5 to 6 kilowatts of solar PV. That goes for the sunny part of the world, and obviously everything is in relation to like how you live and how you consume, etc. But the general sense is that it's already possible to do this. Not if you're part of the poorer part of, I would say, the population, but these are not astronomical numbers for most homeowners, I would say. But there is still like 3% missing. So 97% of the time this goes, you will be more or less energy independent. But then there are the last couple of percentages. You could cover them as well by adding more and more, but these will be extremely costly because you would need to account for days when there is a weather event, when there might not be that much sun, and so on. So it's still an incentive for you to be part of the grid, because the grid is, even if you're energy independent, the grid is your security. And it would be extremely capital intensive to cover those last couple of percentages. So the thing here is, what I'm after with this thesis is that if we don't fix the grid, if the grid gets more and more expensive, which is actually the case in all Western countries at the moment, US and Europe is, I would say, the same story. The distribution costs are rising and the energy costs are declining. So distribution is getting more expensive. That creates an incentive for people that have a lot of money to cut their ties to the grid, just because that will be the rational choice. And that will make the grid even more expensive for those that don't have the money to actually do the same thing. So it like the risk here is that we see the cracks of a negative spiral if we don't fix this. So that's why I believe that we should do whatever it takes, with all technology it takes, to make the grid more elastic, more flexible, because that's in some sense a good thing for everyone. Even the people that are like, it's no problem to become 100% energy independent and cut. It's still cheaper for them to keep the grid those times when they might need it. And then they could also have an extra, I would say, income, because if they have a lot of batteries, they could actually strengthen the grid. So I would say that's the general thesis of why I believe this is so important. It's like, if we don't fix it, it will destroy. The risk is that we're destroying and devaluing a little bit of the infrastructure that we do already have invested in the Western world.
Yeah, so it sounds like, maybe like to set the stage for us a bit, in case our listeners don't know what exactly you guys are building. Like, the world's obviously electrifying in terms of across renewables, in terms of like production and consumption. So on the consumption side, electric vehicles is probably the biggest one. On the production side, it's like solar and wind. It's obviously good for the environment. I think it makes a lot of economic sense in a lot of cases as well, in terms of harnessing this energy that's already out there. But you just noted something that was interesting, and I saw your tweet about Pakistan, in terms of basically like a large percentage of the population was becoming energy independent, but maybe even then like disconnecting from the grid, or like, not really like paying for the maintenance of it anymore. And the existing grid was then having to be supported both from like a demand side and also a maintenance side by the less affluent people who couldn't afford solar on their own. So there's like this kind of electrification happening across renewables on the production and consumption side. But then there's also issues that come up, including like renewable energy production is obviously usually pretty cyclical in terms of like times of day or wind gusts or that kind of thing. So I think that backdrop all makes sense. How does Sourceful specifically fit into that and kind of bridge the gap between traditional energy infrastructure and then like the renewable kind of wave we have coming?
Yeah, so Sourceful Energy, like our core is the connectivity. We are building what we call the last mile connectivity. So there's pieces missing from the equation. If we're going to make this happen, we need to bridge the resources, and would say, if you have a battery, if you have an EV charger, if you have solar, and this is whatever brand, like if you have something, if you own something, or if you have access to it, it should be easy, and it should be done with as little capital as possible, and it should be as easy as possible. So we're talking about cheap consumer hardware, and you as a user, without being an engineer, should be able to solve it. Like, put your assets on the market, so to say. They are already connected. This is a large confusion. Like, when you say you connect things, the electricity grid is like per definition connected. You wouldn't be able to transfer electricity without wires. But now we're talking about connectivity in terms of information, like network connectivity. So, and that's the coordination part. That's what that's really what we are enabling. So we want to enable that to be as efficient as possible. So when you think about Sourceful Energy, we are that layer which makes that. We're sort of doing the Internet of Energy game for distributed energy resources. And then we come into how, like the how part. Yeah, it's in some way it's extremely simple. So you could ask, why aren't more people doing this exact thing if we know it's needed? More or less all inverters, and an inverter is the device that converts the DC from the solar PV to AC on the grid. They have local interfaces, so you're able to tap in, sort of connect directly to the inverter. These are old standard industrial protocols like Modbus RTU or RS485 and etc. They all contain this, even actually older models of hardware, because the vast majority, like I would say, all distributed energy resources that exist today in, let's say, like in Germany, there are millions of solar PV installations. They are already installed. Like, we need to also fix the problem of what is out there now and not just look at the new installs. So we need something that is simple for a vast majority of the devices that already exist. Then we can cover the new ones as well. So that's what we do. There is a gateway. We started with, I would say, consumer hardware. So it's a Raspberry Pi based platform. Simple platform in the way that you can, like, the hardware is not important platform, I would say. You can exchange the hardware. You're just running code. So that is the base of the gateway, which does the communication locally. Then we're able to push the latency and timing and actually make this efficient. You can't have a signal that goes back and forth from, I would say, China back to somewhere in Florida. If you're going to have a grid control that is going sub-second, that won't cut it. And you don't want it either, because there are a lot of reasons why you might not want another state to have influence over your grid infrastructure. So that's why you often end up with a hardware solution out of necessity. So that's what we're doing. So we have two core offerings. We have the gateway Blixt, which is where we started at. We still, I would say, distribute this one. It's compliant with loads of different resources, easy onboarding and so. But we are now also going to push a lot harder on the Zap, which is at this point a very niched product for the European market. There are good and bad things with standards, could say. But I would say in Europe we have a standard called the P1 standard. Sounds like gibberish for most people, and even those that are in Europe might not know about it. But there is a regulation that says that your utility meter needs to have this small port, which is called a P1 port. It's like, if you remember those old telephone cables, RG12, it's that kind of size. The interesting thing is that you can get the data directly in real time from the utility meter. Same data that is sent to the utility company, but we're talking about high resolution data, so every second or every 10 seconds. And you can tap in directly to the source. And this we do with even cheaper hardware. If you combine real-time data from the utility meter with real-time data from the inverter, well, you have a very much, let's say, fuller picture of the energy consumption in your home, which means that you also enable more things. For instance, you can do energy arbitrage, you could do optimizations on like charging your battery when the price is low and maybe discharging when the price is high, etc. All these things becomes possible when you do have both the power to control and also the full scope of all the energy flows in the household, what goes in and out of the utility meter, and also being able to control what the things are within the home. So that's the current status of, I would say, the what of the product.
Yeah, and that's a great overview of the hardware, and I screen share in the back for anyone that's listening if you want to see what the hardware looks like, what it costs, that kind of thing. So now we've covered the hardware. Let's talk about how many nodes are active in how many countries. So I think you're around 400 active nodes in 30 countries. Obviously, like early stage, ramping this up. But let's take a look at the Explorer, and maybe if you could walk us through a bit, kind of like what information is present here, what should people be looking at if they come to the Explorer?
Yeah, exactly. So we've been very, I would say, building in public in that way that I truly believe that this was one of the main things I saw as a really, really strong point when Helium started building was the Explorer. So the Explorer has always been an important part for us, even though it's actually now being we're actually pulling away a little bit of the data which was there from the beginning in the Explorer because of privacy reasons. But the thing here is that the Explorer, what we're looking at here, is that the reward system is at this point, as you said, we're early. So we have a simple system now when we have an emission that rewards people that are in the system with the amounts of data points they're sharing. So if you do have a DER, the distributed or decentralized energy resource, battery, solar, you get rewarded for the amount of data, your stable connection. So at this point, you could have a small solar PV or a big one, you would get the same. But that goes for the, I would say, the early part of the network. What we're looking at in this case is, this is a solar installation. We can look at the, say, real-time power. It's actually still sunny, as you can see.
Let's say you can see the cyclicality I was mentioning earlier of like between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. There's a lot of production from the solar panel installation, but then obviously at night, at midnight, there's basically zero, which makes sense.
Yeah, and we actually had all the battery data in the Explorer quite recently. We removed that data, and there are reasons for that, because you would be able to derive, I would say,
when someone's home.
Yeah. So we don't want that. We had it up for some time, very early, just for showcasing. But we would say that solar PV is, I would say, less personal. The yellow dots, that's how we've done the Explorer at the moment. But if they are light yellow, that means that you're actually daytime. When they are grayed out, it's in the middle of the night. And then you can see that there are actually installations when there might not have been a DER installed just yet. So we do have one or few sites like that. So it's, in some way, it's the Explorer is a simple way to just look at the current state of the network, I would say. But this is a very simplified view of the platform. You as a user, if you do log in and you do have energy resources, like if you do connect your utility meter, your solar PV, and you do have a battery and so on, we've spent loads of resources on building I would say, a state-of-the-art energy app. We've spent a lot of resources on that. So I would say you'll get the power flow in real time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I could probably send you some slides with moving graphics, might be easier to show. But so we really focused on not making this as a pure game for, like, I connect this and earn passive rewards. That's part of the game. We are doing something that is rewarding the user for building the network. That's part of the DePIN thesis, building something together with the community. leveraging the early adopters and rewarding the early adopters. Yes, we are doing that. But you should not forget that there is only one reason why we should exist. And that is we should bring value to the user. The user might be the customer might be the utility company, but it's also the end user. And we see this, I think, in more and more in DePIN projects that's really what matters. You won't be able to win in the long run if you don't have a product that makes sense. So 99% of our time at the moment we spend on the product. And this might be going in waves, but we are in that phase at the moment in Sourceful at least, when we spend more or less all our mind space on the product, on the demand side, partnering with utilities and doing pilots, and not too much on, I would say, the DePIN space. It's extremely important for us. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for the early adopters. But even for them, the most important part, I believe, will not just be the pure token game. Because if it were, it wouldn't be a long time value for them either. So that's why we're really, really extremely focused on that part, and why I believe we will see more of this. When we actually building a DePIN company might not be too different building any other company. You have some unfair advantages and you have some other ways to reach the community and reward people, but these are the main thesis still exists, that you need to have a product that is actually valuable for someone. So
even that being said, right, all the focus on product right now, which I think makes sense. I think you do have a TG planned to come up, sometime later this year, early next. So if you could share anything on timelines for that, and then also why you chose Solana in terms of the chain that you want to build on and want to TG on.
Solana is interesting because as I said, we chose Solana 2022. So you had a hype of Solana, and then it was very dead, I would say, at least in value of the token for quite some time. The reasons why we chose Solana was, I would say, the obvious reasons at that time. We are building in the energy sector. We know that we need fast transactions. In our, I would say, roadmap, this might be very much further down the road, but we will most likely put transactions, I would say, control signals, that's at least my vision, on chain. This might not happen in the very near future, or maybe in the middle near future, because of a lot of reasons, but you don't want to end up in a technology that will not make it possible. And I think this went very well with the thesis that Solana is perhaps still pushing, I'm not sure, but the only possible on Solana thesis. We looked at a lot of different options, and this was just not possible. We wanted this to go extremely quick. We wanted it to be efficient. And we, at that time, also was very cautious about choosing a chain that was compliant with our core vision of, I would say, a little bit more renewable thinking and so on. So it should be energy efficient as well. So all these things aside, I think we made the perfect choice. We haven't not switched chains or sort of deviated from that. Looking in retrospect, we couldn't have chosen better. I think it's the perfect place for building a DePIN still. And then for the TG, we believe this is very much tied to the network growth. Doing things too early is not good for anyone, not the early adopters either. So we believe now that we'll most likely end up in the end of this year, early next year, as you said. But it is dependent on some growth metrics. So if we see the flywheel spinning fast enough and that we do have that PMF for the user base, it will happen earlier, otherwise later. Because doing it without that flywheel spinning, it will be a mistake. Because the most important part is that we do it properly, and that means that we do have a demand side up and are making revenue in fiat. If not, it will just be a pure speculation, and then it will eventually not be a good story. So,
And then I think that makes a lot of sense from like the technical perspective in terms of why Solana. What about like the human aspect? Like a lot of DePIN founders I talk to say that they work really closely with the foundation or labs, or the super teams, for instance, have been helpful in terms of helping them break into new markets. So curious kind of your perspective or experience on the human capital, a human contribution side of Solana and its ecosystem.
yeah, we've been close to the Solana ecosystem. We could probably have been, I would say, working even closer. This goes with, it's hard to do two things at once. Like, I think this is probably true for all DePIN projects or all crypto projects, that either you sort of lean more onto the crypto side and I would say less on, I would say, the product side, or vice versa. I think we've been leaning, at least the last 6 months, more on the product side, and in the beginning more on the crypto side. So it goes back and forth. But yeah, Solana ecosystem has been extremely helpful. I do remember when we sort of, before we even got our first funding, this was, well, things fly fast, but this was just 1.5 years ago. We were part of the Jupiter, one of the earliest, I would say, when Jupiter started with this bootstrapping of the token generation events. I do not remember the name of that event now, but anyhow, we were part of that. I think this was in March 2024. That was probably the first push we got from the Jupiter and the Solana community, getting our name out there, getting our brand out there. And that was, for us, an extremely big moment. Just a couple of months after we got our pre-seed, everyone sort of pushed full time, and then we've just been building since that. So that would not have happened if not for the people in Solana. Like that's at least our story. So it is impactful. It's, I would say, one of the reasons why I believe it's so fun to build in this space. And you also find people that are so much into, like, you always find believers. People are extremely helpful and and open to pushing. So
100%. Yeah, that's cool to hear about, that moment in the Solana ecosystem with Jupiter being kind of like a launch pad for you guys in
yeah,
terms of attention and funding. There's probably a lot of
LF,
stories like that.
LFG Launchpad or something
That's
like
what it
that.
was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
Yeah,
remember that. Well, that's cool. I mean, another kind of maybe blockchain technical type question I wanted to ask you was, and maybe it's really, maybe you're still building it out, but like in the future, besides token rewards and distributing incentives on chain, what else do you plan to use blockchain technology for? Is there like proof of location? Is there cryptographic signing of data from devices? Like, are there NFTs that represent devices on chain? Like, how do you see Sourceful? What do you see what do you see yourselves doing on chain in the future?
yeah. I would say the first part will be the reward system. So we will not, I would say, do stuff in the beginning before we sort of have seen it scale on chain. Like that will be over engineering and doing stuff just in a slow way before there are so many solutions already. So I think we will do a lot of things. That's on the roadmap. There are things that there are so many things that actually make sense if you're already building on a blockchain. You mentioned NFTs. Yes, that's a perfect way of sort of unlocking, like keeping, like, I own this NFT and that unlocks whatever values I have in the ecosystem or in in the platform and so on. So NFTs are a really good way of doing these things, and they're on chain, and you could even trade them. You could like give them away if there is a license or whatever. You could sort of do the analogy with in the Web2 world. We have talked a lot about this, but at this point, no, it's going to be a pure rewards and authentication game. So you shouldn't forget, like, even if we're not TGE yet, and this goes for all Web3 projects, I believe, that are not TGE, just the part of using wallets for authentication is actually a game changer, because that also simplifies a lot of things for building the product. So when you build authentication, you can build it in, I would say, a different way. We do not need to be responsible for your keys. We could actually use a blockchain or a wallet infrastructure for this. So there are things that make sense even without tokens. That's easy to forget when you talk about Web3 solutions. Just the authentication part is actually a quite useful part in terms of building a platform.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it's something people don't think about too often in terms of authentication and signing and that kind of thing. But yeah, crypto is a very big world of a lot of different pieces of technology, and people think about like trading and coins as a large part of it, but there's really a lot of other things that go on underneath.
Just the
go on.
fact that we do have like a private public key pair, like we have a private key embedded in the crypto chips of the devices, and like this has been like the early story of I would say Helium. We are using the same technology, the same chips, and so on. But you see this in other projects as well. Just that part simplifies other things, because it's like we know the data is signed by that device. That there are many ways you still can game the system, but like one way is to make it as hard as possible, is at least that. And then you shouldn't overemphasize the crypto chip. You could do this software based, and it could be good enough, or it could be, but still just private public key authentication and verification. It's extremely effective when you think about linking this to physical infrastructure. Just the mindset around that you link an asset to a key. So
that makes sense. And then in terms of the demand side, I mean, I know it's really early, but if there's anything you can share on like pilots or kind of use cases that you either want to power now or in the future, or revenue numbers or customers, whatever kind of is available and out there, would be great to hear.
Yeah, so I would say the consumer side, I would say the early adopters, and I would say the DePIN side, that's very much an open data set. You'll be able to actually go into the Explorer and see the network growth, or go into our website and check the stats, and you'll be able to see some aggregated numbers. And then on I would say the demand side, we have signed one deal with a utility company. This was quite recently. I won't be able to disclose the name of it, but one utility company in Sweden. And so that's, I would say, the first validation that we have a product that is, we say, valued on the market. And then we are now doing pilots in we're like on the way to start a pilot in South Africa as well, which is a very interesting story, because the product market fit for, I would say, the crypto enabled. If you look at the utilities in Europe, and I would say this most likely goes for the absolute vast majority also in the US, if you mention the word crypto in the same sentence as traditional utility, well, it might not be too successful if you have a sales call. You're confusing people, and they just like, why bother? What we've seen so far, and this is very early still, but this might not be true for instance, South Africa. They were actually in search for exactly a crypto-enabled solution when they were going to solve the problem of flexibility. So this was very new for us. So we were just contacted by them. We didn't even do an outreach sales. So this will be extremely interesting to see where this heads off, because we do a lot of assumptions on market size and where we believe we are going to grow. And then you get out of nowhere a call from another part of the world which you haven't even thought about yet. And I think this might also be parts of like working, like these are probably the pros of working in the Web3 community and like building on crypto, because you become specialized in an area where there are, like when you're in need of a solution which is on the edge, well, we're working in that area. So these are the things that we're, like, I would say, spending a lot of resources on now. Obviously, we are still pushing, and we'll see most likely within the next couple of months more news from us, which I can't disclose now.
Yeah, that's exciting, and congrats on all the traction so far. I mean, even being pretty early stage, like already having a customer and having pilots go on is great. Where would you like to point our community to learn more, get involved with what you're building?
Yeah, so I think the most convenient thing would be to join our Discord server. That, like, we do already have an active community and a lot of helpful people that are able to help you get going. It's always been, I would say, one of the challenges that we've had, and I would say that this goes probably for the majority of DePIN projects within the energy space, that you limit the amount of people that are able to join if you're required to have solar or batteries, etc. So I think looking at growth, the market is huge. It's really like one of the best markets to be playing in, but it's also hard for the adoption part, because the overlap between the crypto-oriented people that are into the Web3 space and might be listening into this podcast, and the community of homeowners that have solar PV and batteries might not be huge. Well, there is an overlap, but unfortunately, it's not a 100% overlap. So I think, please join in. I think that there is still an extreme opportunity because we're still early. Before we become more mainstream, it's always more fun in the beginning. We're exactly at that point now. And we are at the moment pushing a lot in Europe, but next year we'll be pushing more in the US, I would say. It's already possible to join in the US, but I would say that the demand side takes its time, and I would say we're pushing more on Europe at the moment. So
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Well, Fredrik, thank you very much for coming on. Excited to hear about the progress and excited to keep track of everything you guys are doing over the next few months.
thanks.